Anish, hi, and thank you for joining this discussion on Faces of Digital Health, where we are going to talk a little bit about oncology care, how technology can support it, how the whole software space is advancing, and where do you see the challenges and opportunities in the industry. So thank you for being here.
No, absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit more about Elekta. Elekta is offering everything from radiation equipment to oncology medication prescribing software. So you have a very broad footprint in the oncology space. How is the whole field developing from your perspective? You're also a global company.
No, absolutely. So we have a presence in almost every country of the world, either directly or through our distributors. And Elekta, of like you said, we are a leader in radiation therapy. We have devices that we make for traditional radiation therapy, like linear accelerators, but we also lead in the neurosurgery space with products like Gamma Knife. Then we have brachytherapy products. And of course, our software, which powers all of these devices for radiation therapy, is a specialty oncology information system, but it is also a medical oncology software EMR. So for software, we go across the breadth of the entire oncology portfolio, both radiation therapy as well as medical oncology.
Mhm. You personally are based in the US, in the Silicon Valley, if I'm not mistaken. So I actually really wanted to talk to you about how, does the product fit on the US market specifically. You can also make a comparison on how it is to access different markets as well, because, for example, the UK has a very fragmented system in terms of what kind of IT support hospitals use, whereas you've got the leading providers and quite saturated market in the US. And I really wonder, how do you fit in the market? How do you actually work with other vendors? How would you, describe the market from that perspective?
Right. So I think I'll give maybe a little bit of a longer answer, right? The US market is definitely a developed market, a saturated market, and mostly renewals, right? That we have here. As opposed to international, right? We are seeing tremendous growth in China, India, Indonesia, where it's sort of, the economies are taking off. Cancer care, which is a burden in all of these societies around the world, these countries are really investing more and more in oncology, both through their public healthcare system, but also the private enterprise there in those countries are really investing in providing better cancer care for their populations. And we can see a huge uptake in our technologies in these markets. So very different scenario in US versus the developing world. And if you look at Europe, the main difference is, of course, that the markets are very much socialized. UK, which you brought up as an example, where NHS is really distributing healthcare for most of the population. It's a very different ball game in terms of how care is provided, how patients are treated, and it's very different than the US, where it's mainly a private enterprise and a very much a saturated market already.
And so, one of the discussions that I'm observing lately is that there's a lot of appetite also from European companies to go to the US market, but there's a lot of warnings that the US market is not as easy as it may seem. Everybody just sees one country, huge market potential, but when you really go
Yes.
deeper, it's more of a state by state challenge. And especially, in healthcare IT, I'm wondering what's your perspective, because the market is so saturated. How do new entrants even get any market share?
Right, absolutely. US is not one monolithic market, it's just one country. But even in the US, when you look at healthcare IT especially, right, if you look at the provider space, you have the leading academic teaching hospitals, which are a world of their own. They're focused on, of course, providing the best care, but they're also focused on really advancing the level of care and personalization of care as to how they do things, right? And in those settings, in those provider settings, the focus is very different sometimes. They are really willing to adopt best of breed cutting edge technologies, right? So their focus is delivering the best care and advancing research. And then you have these large IDNs, integrated delivery networks of community hospitals, who are very much, the very much constrained by what reimbursements they get. how can they deliver the best care, but also at the same time keeping the costs of care into account. And their focus is managing productivity for the most part. They're not operating at very high margins. They're really looking at productivity, managing local populations. They're also spread out across the length and breadth of the country, really focused in rural communities as well, and so on. So very different setup for those. And then there are, in specialty care like oncology, you always have some freestanding clinics. These freestanding clinics, contrary to perception, they are not only in rural areas, they're also in the most urban settings, right? But they are like one or two doctor shops. They're running their own radiation therapy clinic, or they're running their own infusion centers, and so on. And their focus again is different. They are not able to adopt enterprise EMRs like Epic or Cerner. They are really focused on saying, how can I deal best for one therapeutic area like oncology or cardiology and so on. So their willingness to adopt the latest technology, the parameters that they use are very different. So for any new entrant, even coming from Europe or even a new company in the US, you have to take into account the segmentation that inherently exists in the US market. And what technology are you bringing to the market? Is it something that's broad platform level that can go across the enterprise? Is it something in one therapeutic area like oncology? And then if it is in one therapeutic area, who are you targeting? Are you going after the community clinics? Are you going after the freestanding clinics? Are you really wanting to go after the key opinion leaders where you are, really cutting edge? Your technology is coming out of a cutting edge research from someplace and you want to start there. So you have to really take these parameters into account. Fortunately for us, Elekta serves all of these markets. We've been around for a long time. We've celebrated 50 years of our existence recently, 30 years in software. So I think we've managed to sort of start in different areas and scale across all of these. So we have a very healthy presence in the US, and we only expect to grow from where we are.
Mm. And where do you still see the untapped needs and opportunities for vendors on the U.S. market because of the historical reasons and incentives that have already been in place in the past? Healthcare is highly digitized in the U.S. So, but where do you see that there's still an opportunity, or that there's still the bigger need, the biggest need?
No, absolutely. Even with all the advances we have, the challenges in healthcare remain the same as they were a few years ago, which is immense problem of burnout for the clinicians, really boosting productivity for the clinics and the hospitals. And then, on the other hand, you have the desire from patients and from doctors to provide the best personalized care for each patient. And sometimes these two things are in conflict. Inherently, as you try to personalize the care for every patient, personalize the treatment that you want to give to every patient, it can be more expensive, and it can also take longer, which means it can lead to lesser productivity. So these two things sometimes are in conflict, and companies are always trying to balance it. So I think the opportunity, especially with the advancement of AI and Gen AI, is that these two things don't have to be mutually exclusive going forward. You can do both. And you can do both from a perspective of clinical efficiency in delivering more precise, personalized care for every patient, and boosting productivity gains to make sure there's less clinician burnout as we go on that journey. So I think the potential for companies is that the vendors and technologies that can actually bridge that gap do both at the same time. There is tremendous potential. And I do believe that companies who will not do it will be the ones who will see themselves getting out of business, getting disrupted by the ones who will, right? So that opportunity is always there. And you
Mm.
can see the focus is going to be more and more in bridging the gap of productivity and personalization.
Mhm. You mentioned, AI and generative AI and all the boom that has happened in 2023. How has that impacted you? Are you in the experimentation phase with the technology? Did you already include anything in your products?
Right, so we've already been including a lot in terms of AI in our products. Traditionally, we have products that help with planning of treatments for radiation treatment. We have products that deliver, both medical and radiation oncology. We have patient engagement solutions which really leverage AI, harness the data coming back from patients as they're reporting their symptoms while they're on treatment, to help providers say when do you need to intervene and so on. So we've been using AI quite a bit in the last couple of years. These solutions have been rolled out. in areas of treatment planning, in areas of patient-reported outcomes and enhanced patient engagement, and so on. Now we are really looking at saying, okay, what's the next step here? How do we leverage generative AI better, both for high boosting productivity and boosting clinical efficiencies? A lot of these products are still under development, so I cannot discuss the specific use cases yet. But you can typically see that the ability for us now to harvest the medical literature, the clinical pathways, and then helping doctors recommending the best care for their patients. I think that's a step closer. So we are really focused on innovation like that.
Mhm. We talk a lot about patient feedback, patient inclusion, personalized medicine. And since you mentioned all the things that you are doing on that end, so from patient reported outcomes, from apps that support patients in that care, can you maybe explain a little bit how does that feedback to clinicians and impact their decision making and the course of treatment? Like what kind of circle is there in between patients at home receiving care and reporting on what's happening, and how fast do the doctors then respond?
Absolutely. And this is a extremely important point, because what happens is different patients have different interpretations of the same side effects while they are on either on medication or radiation therapy and so on. And how patients report these outcomes depends a lot on their own perceptions. So, for example, if there are two identical patients, similar patients going on identical treatments, and let's say they have similar side effects, which may be of concern, one patient may say, oh, this level of headache I'm having is okay. I can deal with it. I don't have to call the doctor for it. And the another one may be panicking and calling the nurse line or the doctor 2 times a day saying, I can't bear with it. I need to come and see you every day. Now, in some cases, this side effect may be expected, and you can set that expectation with the patient. And in some cases, this side effect could be a symptom of something severe that will need medical intervention. Only the doctors know it, because they know what treatment they're putting the patient on, what are acceptable levels of these symptoms, and what are not, right? So when we look at our patient reported outcome solution, so we call it Elekta One Patient Companion, and Elekta One is our umbrella term, our wholly integrated medical and radiation therapy software suite. We call it Elekta One. We have this module for patient engagement. We call it Elekta One Patient Companion. The clinical team can reach out. They can have two-way communication with the patient real time. The patients can report their symptoms saying, okay, and the clinical team already knows what treatment they're on, where they are in the treatment cycle. And when patients are now reporting symptoms, we sort of try to capture data in an objective way. We give them a scale of 1 to 10 and say, okay, you are on this treatment. How is your symptom for so and so? How is your symptom for headache, for nausea? And these are simple things, and there are more complicated side effects which are tailored based on the therapy they are on. And then the clinical team automatically gets an alert saying this is something you need to look at. And that's based on the AI we have in place, right? Saying, okay, this is something you need to call the patient in. This is something you can sort of tell the patient it's okay, and so on, right? So it becomes a very important factor in keeping the patient at ease during the treatment, intervening when it's really required, and otherwise telling the patient it's okay, you're on a normal treatment cycle, you can come back next week as planned, and so on. So very important. I think it's something we see the patient satisfaction levels change dramatically when this tool is used.
Hmm. It also impacts a lot, all the workflows that clinicians have.
Absolutely. And I think this is the second good point. Thank you for bringing that up. We have also integrated all this patient data coming back straight into the oncology information system. So that it's not a standalone tool that has to be monitored separately. All of this data comes back straight into the patient chart. So as the patient chart is being reviewed by the clinical team, they exactly see how the patient is doing in real time. And that's why this integration of workflow, like you said, it's extremely important for clinicians, because they have so many other systems now to manage otherwise. If these workflows are not integrated, guess what? These systems are not being used. So the
Hmm.
integrated workflow, integrated into where the clinical team spends their uh, uh, day-to-day time, manage day-to-day systems, managing the patients. If the patient data is not reflected there, it's going to be missed. Clinicians are super busy. they don't have the time or the resources to look at 20 things all at once. So that integration is key, and that's what we've done with Elekta One.
Mhm. How do you see that the whole field is developing? What's the most difficult thing for you in software development? On the one hand, there's all new technologies that are here, from AI, from cloud technology, from new data standards, new interoperability ideas, to then uh, going back to the existing software, which isn't just very easy to update or to change or to build from scratch. So we always have this legacy issue with healthcare software. So how do you bridge that?
No, I think that's an excellent point. The same doctors and clinicians who work on the legacy medical software in their hospitals, they are also using Uber on their phone to call an app, or the banking app to deposit checks and do online banking. And even their questioning and their levels of frustration with the legacy software is pretty high. What we are also seeing as a result of all that is the willingness to adopt newer technologies in healthcare IT in the cloud is improving. We can see a lot of adoption of cloud technologies inside the hospitals. So I think the movement away from legacy software is already happening. Now, the challenge is that some of these systems have so much functionality. A lot of it is rich functionality that has been built over the last 20, 30 years. Migrating away from them is a very long journey. And what's key, or the most important fact, is a lesson that you can learn from the travel industry or the banking industry. Like if you look at travel, you go to Google Flights, you book your travel. All the servers in the back end, they're still sort of the legacy servers, right? They are, of course, getting modernized, but that's happening over time. But for you as a user, the user experience to book a flight, change a flight, manage your reservation is extremely modernized. And I think that's the journey healthcare IT systems need to take, is that the user experience for the patients, for the clinicians, for the physicians, we have to really modernize that and clearly optimize the legacy systems in the backend. And that can take a longer period of time. We all know it because there's so much functionality and so much intricacies and interoperability that needs to be handled. But we need to really start and lead with the physician and the clinician experience, and of course for the patients as well. And I see that's the journey of modernization that legacy healthcare IT vendors are on.
Mhm. And what's the best approach that you think vendors should take in order to achieve this? Like, how are you tackling this issue? It's hard to sometimes let go of what was developed in the past,
Of course, right,
to
right.
modernize and switch to new frameworks and new technologies.
Right, I think there's two or three critical factors to look at this, right? One is to say relentless prioritization of what you need to take forward with and what can be let go and repackaged and delivered in a different way. Second is to say, the adoption of cloud and new technologies that you can deliver in the cloud will be so much faster than having to upgrade legacy systems one by one for every customer. The pace of innovation that Salesforce or Google can deliver in the cloud, you cannot match that if you're a legacy software vendor, right? So the pace of innovation that you can bring to the end user, to the patient, to the clinician, is so much better that this adoption has to happen. So if you take the lens of how we can quickly innovate, it's easy for me to deliver innovation for a company, but if you cannot deploy that innovation, if you cannot upgrade your customers to have that latest technology, it doesn't matter how quickly you release it, right? So making sure that you bridge the gap at the last mile, taking that lens in mind, that's what the legacy technology vendors have to really look at and say, how do I break out of this? How do I deliver innovation faster and increase my customer satisfaction? I think that's the best way to look at this.
What's the hardest thing for you in product development, in software development, given that you work across markets?
I think the hardest thing sometimes is standardization, right? When you are such a global company, you have so many deployments across the world, you have to make sure that you are doing things that can scale globally. And sometimes there's so much noise from certain places where you want to do something that will serve everybody's needs, but also, there's always something very special. As an example, right? We are seeing such a new influx of regulations when it comes to e-prescribing, when it comes to regulations of interoperability. Uh, Now, every country has the right intent, every market has the right intent that they want to make patients' life easier. They want to make sure systems can exchange data, but they're all doing it in their own vacuums. They're not. It's not an international forum that everybody agrees this is the way we're gonna exchange patient data with each other, right? So US will do its own thing. The Australia, New Zealand market will do its own thing. Of course, Asian markets doing their own thing. So prioritizing all these things, although the outcome and the end goal is the intention is the same, the methodology is so different, and then deploying resources to manage all of that, it's a challenge for every global company in the healthcare IT space.
Mm.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you reminded me on all the integrations that you need to do if you're working in different markets. So can you
exactly.
maybe talk about that a little bit? So how many vendors, for example, do you integrate uh, in the US market? There's huge movements around data standards, and but like vendors will say that some players are not as cooperative or making things as easy as they could, so the systems could exchange data more easily.
No, absolutely right. I think we take a lot of pride in saying that we believe in open interoperability. We support an open ecosystem, and that's something we have a legacy of doing as Elekta, both in the device market and in the software market. Now, when you look at our software system, the oncology information system, we connect with the most devices for radiation therapy. I think our oncology information system supports almost all the devices that deliver radiation therapy. That's on one side for the device connectivity. And then on the other side, when it comes to other healthcare IT system connectivity, we support all standards, right? Traditionally using HL7 version 2, version 3 CCDAs. Now we've adopted FHIR. We've recently launched our product adopting the 21st Century Cures Act compliance in the United States, which is taking FHIR to a whole new level. And we are also fulfilling our obligations for e-prescribing in international markets. So if you ask me specifically the number of systems we connect, it's such a large number, and it keeps changing. Anybody who sort of uh, plays in this open ecosystem game using the right standards and so on, I think we connect to them very well. We are also strong believers in not having too many proprietary integrations, especially in the healthcare IT space, because then that's sort of a race to the bottom in my mind, because then you're trying to lock the ecosystem out. We believe that we want to exchange data in a fair, in a transparent way that will benefit our patients and our clinicians.
Unfortunately, the cancer statistics or the incidence or prevalence of cancer is increasing. So the oncology space has huge market potential. Therapies are advancing, science are advancing with incredible speed. We've got precision medicine, targeted therapies, also radiation or proton beam therapies. How do you, as a provider of various solutions in the space, how do you see that the market is going to develop further? What are your future expectations in terms of technology and how it will support treatments?
No, I think that's a fantastic question, and then it's also a sobering one. Like we see, as people live longer, as other improvements of life come in, the incidence of cancer is very high, right? It's also increasing. We see that, right? What we also see is that traditionally treatments were in combination. So a patient who's diagnosed with breast cancer, for example, they will have surgery, they may have a little bit of chemotherapy, and then they have some radiation in some sequence, right? I think what we anticipate also is that a combination of therapies coming out in a different way. So, for example, certain medications coming on market which actually activate the cancer cells such that they respond better to radiation. And when I say respond better, more targeted, and the radiation is actually more effective when certain uh, medications are put into practice. So the field of theranostics, the field of radiopharma, as you call it, I really feel that these will make a very big difference in how cancer care will be delivered and how effective it is in certain cases. You're already seeing that in immunotherapy. These are very expensive at this time, so the adoption levels are low. But as you see advancements in immunotherapy and radiopharma, I think these fields will come more and more together and deliver better treatment for our patients.
Mm. Is there anything that you are specifically looking forward to in terms of technology development in healthcare? And it can, go beyond just oncology. In your past, you've worked for various companies such as GE Healthcare, such as Philips. So you've experienced various uh, options for healthcare and how it interacts with technology.
But I think for me, the most exciting thing is going to be, the development of, now there's a lofty goal, they call it the digital twin, but the ability to predict what will happen to a human being when they're put on a particular care pathway. Now, this is a little bit of a technical term that I use, but in simpler language is to say, why does one therapy work better for patient A and work not so good for patient B? And then something else works better for patient B and not so much for patient A. And the ability of technologies that are out there to do that has been very limited. And it's not because the technology is not evolved in terms of the computing power we have at our disposal. It's just that the science itself has not been so accurate in helping us with these things. So the combination of the scientific advancements, as you're mapping the human genome, as we learn, there was recently a publication from Cambridge in the UK in partnership with DeepMind from Google that they've map the whole human proteome, meaning all the proteins in the human body. The human genome has already been mapped. So as we get more and more understanding of the sciences, I think now the technology from a computer science perspective in terms of the availability of generative AI-like technologies, the availability of unlimited computing power in the cloud, I think the marriage of this science with this technology, that's the most exciting thing that you will see, not only for oncology, but in healthcare in general. And I think that's going to be super exciting for all of us.
Mm. Is there anything that you would point out to in terms of what we should be cautious about in terms of, future development? There's a lot of excitement, and
Yes.
rightly so. And we have more problems than we can solve in healthcare. But it's also an industry where you shouldn't go too fast because
Yes.
lives are at stake. So, what are your thoughts?
No, but absolutely. I think I think you sort of hinted at it yourself. It's the intention of doing good, but the speed at which you move there's a law of unintended consequences, which sometimes only show up in the longer term. So how careful can we be as we advance these technologies for, in terms of just pure recommendation as to what's the best treatment in terms of using them? So I think how accurate these will be. Will they work 90% of the time or 99% of the time? And should we deploy them into actual medical practice? What's that right threshold of accuracy, and when is human intervention required, when it's not? And even all the regulatory bodies across the world are trying to figure this out as these technologies are being deployed. And that's really where we have to be careful about, right? We see that consequences of that in relatively day-to-day world, like autonomous driving, right? Even there we cannot decide easily as to what's good enough. And trying to put that technology in the healthcare space, it's good. We need to have a fierce debate as to what's good, what's really good, and what's not good enough yet. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think is the major area for us to watch out for.
Yeah, it's been a strong topic in 2023 with generative AI and just
Yeah.
understanding that there's so much that we still don't know, but the technology is here. So what do we do in terms of regulation?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad I'm not the one deciding only. No, I'm kidding, but I think it's a very important topic that also needs collaboration between different regulatory agencies, between the industry and academic institutions to come to an agreement as to what is safe and what's good and so on.
Mm. Anish, thank you so much for today. This is all the questions that I have for you.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.